Hello and welcome to TYT Community. Today I've got a great panel discussion, and it's about Elizabeth Warren. She takes on the bankers. But first I'm going to introduce our panel. Here with us today from the very first couple of TYT Community episodes, our old friend Kevin Wayne.
How you doing?
We have Brian, our Canadian correspondent. Of course, my lovely and beautiful co-host, Rhiannon Avaneen.
Thank you.
And Sean Fitzgerald.
Thank you.
So, glad to have you guys all here tonight. It's great to have you. Let's get into the video clip of Senator Warren taking on the bank regulators. Let's check it out.
The United States government takes money laundering very seriously for a very good reason. And it puts very strong penalties in place. In addition to monetary penalties, it's possible to shut down a bank that's been involved in money laundering. Individuals can be banned from ever participating in financial services again, and people can be sent to prison. Now, in December, HSBC admitted to money laundering, to laundering $881 million that we know of for Mexican and Colombian drug cartels, and also admitted to violating our sanctions for Iran, Libya, Cuba, Burma, the Sudan. And they didn't do it just one time. It wasn't like a mistake. They did it over and over and over again across a period of years. And they were caught doing it, warned not to do it, and kept right on doing it, and evidently making profits doing it. Now, HSBC paid a fine, but no one individual went to trial. No individual was banned from banking, and there was no hearing to consider shutting down HSBC's activities here in the United States. So what I'd like is, you're the experts on money laundering. I'd like your opinion. What does it take? How many billions of dollars do you have to launder for drug lords, and how many economic sanctions do you have to violate before someone will consider shutting down a financial institution like this?
For our part, we imposed on HSBC the largest penalties that we had ever imposed on any financial institution. We looked at the facts and determined that the appropriate response there was a very, very significant penalty against the institution.
Let me just move you along here, though, on the point, Mr. Cohen. My question is, given that this is what you did, what does it take to get you to move toward even a hearing, even considering shutting down banking operations for money laundering?
So, Senator, we at the Treasury Department, under OFAC and FinCEN authority, don't have the authority to shut down a financial institution.
I understand that. I'm asking, in your opinion, you are the ones who are supposed to be the experts on money laundering. You work with everyone else, including the Department of Justice. In your opinion, how many billions of dollars do you have to launder for drug lords before somebody says, we're shutting you down?
Well, I think the authority to pull a license, pull the charter, is the authority that is committed to the supervisors, to the OCC, the Fed, whoever the supervisor may be.
I'm not hearing your opinion on this. You are supposed to be, Treasury is supposed to be you are the leaders in how we understand and work together to stop money laundering. And I'm asking, what does it take even to say, here's where the line is. We're going to draw a line here, and if you cross that line, you're at risk for having your bank closed.
So, Senator, we're mindful of what our authorities are, mindful of what the supervisor's authorities are. We will and have and will continue to exercise our authorities to the full extent of the law. The question of pulling a bank's license is a question for the regulators.
So you have no opinion on that? You sit in Treasury and you try to enforce these laws, and I've read all of your testimony. You tell me how vigorously you want to enforce these laws, but you have no opinion on when it is that a bank should be shut down for money laundering? Not even an opinion?
Of course, we have views on...
That's what I asked you for, your views.
But I'm not going to get into some hypothetical line drawing exercise.
Well, it's
but
somewhere beyond $881 million of drug money.
So the authority to shut down an institution or hold a hearing about it, I believe, is triggered by a criminal conviction. And that is not something, we don't do criminal investigation, we don't do trials or anything like that. We do civil enforcement, and in the case of HSBC, we gave essentially the statutory maximum civil money penalties, and we gave very stringent cease and desist orders, and we did what we have the legal authority to do.
I appreciate that, Mr. Powell. So you're saying you had no advice to the Justice Department on whether or not this was an appropriate case for a criminal action?
So the way it works is the Justice Department has total authority. This is the heart of what they do. It's the heart of their jurisdiction to decide who gets prosecuted and for what. It's not our jurisdiction. They don't do monetary policy. They don't give us advice on that. We cooperate with them, and we discuss with them. We collaborate with them, and we did on HSBC. They ask us specific questions. How does this statute apply? What would happen if we did this? We answer those questions. That's what we do.
So what you're saying to me is you are responsible for these banks, but you're telling me you have no view when it's appropriate to consider even a hearing to raise the question of whether or not these banks should have to close their operations when they engage in money laundering for drug cartels?
I'll tell you exactly when it's appropriate. It's appropriate where there's a criminal conviction.
And so you have no view on it until after the Justice Department has done that?
Again, the Justice Department makes that decision. We play our role in that. We have a constant dialogue with them around not just essentially a broad range of violations that take place. We always have the Justice Department involved, but when they make these decisions, they make them themselves.
So I understand that I'm over my time, and I'll just say here, if you're caught with an ounce of cocaine, the chances are good you're going to go to jail. If it happens repeatedly, you may go to jail for the rest of your life. But evidently, if you launder nearly $1 billion for drug cartels and violate our international sanctions, your company pays a fine and you go home and sleep in your own bed at night. Every single individual associated with this. And I think that's fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, you know what? I love that. I absolutely love that from Senator Warren. I think she's absolutely right, and I love the point that she made right at the end. You get caught with drugs of any kind enough times, you go to prison for the rest of your life. Think of the one story that the Young Turks have covered before about the lady who her husband or boyfriend hid cocaine in the attic, and she got prison for the rest of her life. So, I mean, great point. So I'm just going to open it up. What does everybody think? Opinions, thoughts?
I'll give you a quick opinion here. That was a quick, funny thought I had while I was watching all of that. And it's a reference for anyone who's familiar with the old Charlie Brown cartoons. In the comics and the cartoons, the teacher was always the one who you could never understand. You never knew what the teacher was saying, and the kids would respond legibly to some imagined question. In this one, though, we could hear the teacher perfectly. We could hear what she was asking, what she wanted to know. It was the Peanuts who were just going wah 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 wah.
That's brilliant. I understand that fully. That was excellent.
These guys were all sitting there like, I don't have the authority.
Well, yeah, exactly, Jeff. That's exactly what I was going to say. The thing that I noticed most about this whole play at words is it was a deferment of responsibility from the very beginning. At first they were like, well, the authority goes to the supervisors, and then they were like, well, these are questions that should go to the regulators, and then Powell later was saying that, well, it's up to the prosecutors to prosecute first, because we won't do anything unless criminal charges are filed against
basically
them.
Leaving it up to the Department of Justice, Eric Holder.
Everyone else. Leaving it up to everyone else except them. They will
but these guys are the regulators. They were supposed to have actually regulated Wall Street, and they didn't do their job. So you've got Senator Warren out there, basically, taking them out to the woodshed.
Well, that's true, but you have to understand that, a lot of her frustration based on the question she was asking was the fact that she might have been asking the wrong people the right questions. You know, if they might fully and legitimately be deferring those questions because it doesn't make sense to them, and it doesn't make sense to ask them to speculate if they are not the correct people to respond to it. If we have all these regulators and they can't do anything, then that's our problem of how we have our system set up that says that, well, we've given all these people all these responsibilities to regulate this market. However, none of them and all of them together don't have the actual authority to enforce that regulation.
Yeah, but did you notice the question?
The way our system was set up and how she's so frustrated with the. She wanted to know their opinions, and they were not willing to give them. And I'm okay with them not being willing to give their opinion. It would have been nice if they would have, but.
Well, that was the question that she was asking: is it your opinion, or, you know, what
is your views? Because you're the expert on this subject matter, I would like your views on this. What do you think would be appropriate in this situation? And she could not get an answer out of them.
No, and that matters if it's discovery hearing or not, to say, look, are we trying to change the regulations to get this? You know, and I think she was getting frustrated, but I think she might have reworded her question a little bit to say, hey, look, if we don't have it in place now, we need to build a system that can regulate this. So will you please give me your opinion to help us build a system that does it? And I think she might have got a little bit more out of these guys if she'd have asked like that. Don't get me wrong, I love Warren.
She really wasn't trying to ask them that question. Like, she wasn't really trying to get the answer. She was just trying to point out that if you're big, you can get away with bloody murder. Like, her point at the end summed up everything beautifully. If anybody on this panel gets caught in the United States, depending on your state, with the littlest amount of marijuana, then you go to jail. But if you launder money for some of the most violent people in the world, and it's not just the drug cartels, it's also Al-Qaeda they laundered money for, then you pay a fine, which is a percentage of the money that you made doing the crime. Like, that's the point she wanted to make, is that there's two different standards in this country, and it's ridiculous.
Well, now, actually, I have a good point. I have some information. Actually, they paid $1.9 billion in fines and forfeitures. Do you know how much of that, that actually impacted them? That's about 10% of their pre-tax profit that they earned in 2010. Do you think that's going to disincentivize them from doing this, from continuing to do this? Fuck no. They're going to keep on doing it. They're going to continue to launder money for drug cartels, for Iran, because what they got was just a slap in the wrist.
Right. Well, Sean brings up a good point also, in that I don't think she expected anything else than what she got from them. I don't think she expected to get a straight answer. I think she did. Yeah. I think her intention actually was basically what she said in the end. She wanted to make a point. She wanted to make a statement. She wanted to point out for anyone who was watching, anyone who was listening, and the people she was talking to, that this is a seriously screwed up system. Our priorities are screwed to the max, and we are locking people up that don't deserve it, and the people that we should be locking up are getting a free ride and basically excused of their crimes.
Well, corporations are people too.
Well, here's something else too, and that is,
let's put that corporation in jail.
Sort of based on what you were saying before, Kevin. It's maybe the question might have been a little out there too, because she was asking them, what would it take to shut down these banks, to shut them down? And I think that might have been a little hard for them to deal with and think about. I like the way she had it at the previous hearing. I think it was the previous hearing that she did this on, where she was asking, what would it take to punish the people who are responsible for doing this? Not necessarily shut down the bank, because they're not the owners of the bank, so why penalize the bank? But what would it take to just bring some of these people individually to justice for the crimes that they've done?
But now, do you remember her first question from the last hearing? She asked, how tough are you? And she was asking the regulators, how tough are you? What can you actually do?
I didn't she ask, like, how many have you actually prosecuted? Did
Yeah,
she ask
that
them
too.
to specify how many people had actually been prosecuted due to their efforts?
Yeah, she asked that question, and the answer to that was zero.
None.
None.
Zero.
My point, one of the things I wanted to bring up is she was trying to make an overall point about regulation, and to me, she made a bigger point about the way we prosecute the drug war. If she wanted to get the real answer, if she wanted to get a good comparison to what HSBC did, and how to actually seize the bank, she should have compared it to other banks that have been caught trading with the enemy, like the Union Banking Corporation during World War II. Like, she actually
Which still exists, by the way, under a different name. Yeah.
I know, but it was seized at one point for trading with the enemy. So I would, if I was trying to point out what she was trying to point out, I would have brought up trading, money laundering with Al-Qaeda and Iran. Like, the drug war just points out that we have the most lopsided justice system in this country. That if you're the lowest level drug user, then you're done. But if you're the highest drug launderer or anywhere on the top,
you're a
as long
banker.
as you're connected, it's not just bankers though. In our military strategy in Afghanistan, not to go too far off, we actually helped opium growers because opium growers were persecuted by the Taliban.
Right.
So we'll help them grow opium in Afghanistan, but when you smoke marijuana in the United States, you go to prison. Like, it's a broader
entirely
point.
hypocritical system.
Exactly.
And Sean, I like how you brought up some of the other banks. Actually, there were at least a dozen banks that had been fined for doing almost the same kind of thing, money laundering. You've got ING Bank, you've got Wachovia, you've got the Union Bank of California, Lloyd's, Credit Suisse, and some of these names should be familiar because Credit Suisse had actually given to both the Obama and Romney campaigns heavily during the last 2 election cycles.
Oh, I should show you the top 12 contributors for the McCain against him.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
They're the same people.
They're just in a different order.
Yeah.
Right, and so you've got all these banks and stuff that don't get punished. They get fined a very small percentage of their profits, and they continue to launder money because they contribute to political campaigns, and so they're basically slap on the wrist. Go ahead, keep doing what you're doing.
Well,
I hate the too big to fail puns, but literally what Eric Holder said is they're literally too big to jail. That he'll actually talk with economic advisors before prosecuting certain bankers because he's afraid of how the markets react. That's not how. If you're trying to convict people of crimes, that's not how you do it. You just go. You have to have the attitude, justice be done, may the heavens fall. And that's not their attitude. Their attitude is the banks are too big to fail, they're too big to prosecute, they're too big for anything. We just listen to the banks. That's the government's attitude.
There's a point of prosecution that we have limits to, though. Let me pose a question to all of you. How do we impose punishment onto corporations other than a fine that does very little to them? Now, if you consider the question in the reverse, if that fine was given to an individual person, the damages that it would cause, even very, very wealthy people, it would cause severe damages, in their pocketbook from it, but they would also be subject to a jail sentence. Now, I understand that you make corporations to lower your liability. All right, it's basically the only reason that you would make one is to lower your personal risk. And if we're going to allow that, okay, if we're going to do that civilly, that might be something we can understand, but not criminally. Like, there should be no protection for an individual for a corporation's criminal activity. If you are on the board serve in any capacity on the board or as one of the officers, then you should be able to not claim ignorance in any way, shape, or form. Even if you were completely ignorant of it and it was all the other people, you should not be given that right to claim that ignorance. You are part of something, and you need to either be part of it or not be part of it. And if you're going to be part of something, then you need to be personally responsible for criminal activities of that organization, and then you might see a way to punish these large criminals. There's no other way to punish them other than that. A small 1/10 of 1% of their income over 10 years is not even going to make them blink.
Well, you know, with your analogy, it's kind of funny because if you think about it in more layman terms, what they do with that would be the same as taking a murderer and charging the gun for doing the murder, as opposed to the person who shot the gun.
Yes, we're going to give this gun, you know, the death penalty. It didn't affect the person who committed the crime at all.
Right.
We're gonna melt the gun.
Yeah.
But to your point about CEOs pleading ignorance, they actually did pass a law to stop that. It was after the Enron scandal. They passed Sarbanes-Oxley, right? The government is not prosecuting based on that law. They're just not like they're keep settling outside of court. But you're still not allowed to use ignorance if you're a CEO as an excuse for not knowing about criminal activity. But they just don't. The banks run the joint, so even if the law says that, it's not gonna make a difference.
Let me tell you this. I came from a place that used Sarbanes-Oxley and had to regulate by it. And when you tell corporations and employers, you would, from the insurance end, I would deal with them, and we would tell corporations and their HR departments and their whatever that no, you have to do these certain things to inform your clients or your employees or whatnot. And they would go, yeah, whatever, just do what we need to have done. And you'd go, well, you really need to tell them about this. And they'd go, yeah, whatever. And then in the end, if something, they would ignore it. And as the institution, there wasn't much we could do other than stopping business and saying, no, in that case, we can't proceed. And then they would come back. If something went wrong, if something goes wrong and someone tries to sue the corporation because there was some mismanagement of something, then they come back and blame the institution for not insisting that they do what it was they need to do, that they didn't actually shut down the process and they let them go ahead with it. So there's a bit of a funky area there too.
You know, back to Sean's point, actually, you know who received some of that settlement money? The Federal Reserve. Also, you know, our private bank that, you know, mints our currency, they got a piece of that. And so, of course, they're not. You know, they wouldn't get anything out of it if we put CEOs in jail. But this way, they get a little bit of money from the penalties. So, I mean, it just goes back to his point that the banks run the joint.
Well,
Everybody gets
when
paid.
you find a corporation that is so big that they actually get part of the fine money, you're not solving any problem that you consider criminal. Because that is the case. You're talking about, you know, some of the banks that are so big that if they get 10% of the money credited to them, you know, they can loan out 90% of that. So they literally create 90% more money than what they actually have. So to fine them a portion of that does nothing. It does absolutely nothing. They're part of the system that gets the money returned to them eventually. So
well, and here's the funny thing with that too. Okay, so they're going to pay the bank's going to pay out $10 million in fines, and they're going to pay it to who or to whom, and where is that person or where is that entity going to put that money? Right back in the bank, so that the bank can lend it out.
right.
And you also forget that the banks are too big to fail. So if they ever get a fine that they can't pay, then the government's going to fine them and pay the fine for them.
Right, but and that's the other thing too, is that it's such a strange concept that too big to fail. Literally, they're not, because it really doesn't matter. You can just remint like we do now. It isn't going to change anything, the way stuff's minted. So it's a very strange game of cat and mouse with the money or credit. That's what I can refer to it.
Let's do some final points. Sean, since let's start with you, man. What's your final point?
My final point is, look, Elizabeth Warren, I may disagree with her on a lot of issues, but I like having intellectually honest people in the Senate. And what she points out here is that there's two different justice systems. So there's the justice system for me and all the people on this panel, except for our Canadian. And then there's a justice system for the international corporations, where, if you're committing the lowest bit of crime as a minor citizen, then you get the book thrown at you. If you're the highest level of criminal, helping the most violent people in the world, then you get a little slap on the wrist that will probably be reduced later into nothing. So there's two different justice systems, and I thank Elizabeth Warren for pointing it out.
Exactly. Our system is so skewed and hypocritical. Not only are our priorities out of whack, but it's the greed. It's all motivated by greed. And those with the most money have the most power, and they can avoid the issue, and they can scapegoat the issue to someone else. And this is what I'm seeing most of all. People deferring responsibility. This person saying, well, that's not my area, check with this person, and then go to that person, well, that's not my problem, you have to check with those people. By creating this corporate system, you're able to defer all responsibility from yourself and lean it on everyone else, and in the end, no one takes responsibility. No one is held accountable, and the problem is never solved. And these greedy people are allowed to keep doing what they do, and it will go on interminably. Insofar as Elizabeth Warren, I love her for being brave enough, strong enough to speak eloquently and speak the truth. And frankly, I would love to see her in the White House. And I would probably vote for Elizabeth Warren 2016.
Well, hey, love Elizabeth Warren. She's great at what she does, or at least she appears to be great. And last thoughts, speaking as the Canadian contingent here, I'll tell you this is a refrain that I repeat to my American friends a lot. And the situation as it is doesn't have to be that way. Up here, where north of the border, corporations aren't people. CEOs and high-ranking corporate officials aren't safe from criminal prosecution by hiding behind their corporations. In Canada, we have brought big bank officials and big CEOs to trial for criminal conducts, and we have jailed and heavily fined them personally, and it seems to work as somewhat of a deterrent. I mean, it still goes on. It will always go on in the corporate world, but at least up here we have some sort of recourse, and these people know that they can't just run roughshod however they feel.
I really just have to agree with the rest of the panel on some of the points that they've made, and any more points that I would make on it, brother, would just get us way deeper into the conversation.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna say that I love how Senator Warren actually closed it out with the analogy towards the drug war. I think that definitely hits home. I think for a lot of people that have been wronged by the drug war, or just to see how absolutely silly our banking system has gotten. And another point is the fact that our banking system is too large, but it's not too large to fail. It has failed, and it will fail again, and the taxpayer is going to end up rescuing the banks once again, just like we did in 2008, and that's going to steer us towards another path of even more austerity. As the banks collect more, the people are going to get less. And I think that that is a fundamentally bad thing. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us on TYT Community. Thank you to all the panel. Where can we find everybody?
90 for now. That's IAMSEAN 90, and Twitter at the same handle.
You can always find me at Twitter at Lady Rhiannon 824. You can find me at my blog at ladyrhiannon824.blogspot.com. I also have a profile at the Daily Kos, and you can find me on my YouTube channel, The Lady Rhiannon, or Facebook at facebook.com/Lady Rhiannon824.
You usually find me in Toronto. Online, you can always visit my channel, PirateFish1 on YouTube.
Yeah, veritynation.wordpress.com or at @KWayneReport for Twitter.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter at Jeff's Politics. It's right there on the screen. Just take a look. Go there. Follow me on Twitter. And you can also check out my show. It's another progressive show. And at the address down below over here, youtube.com/JC Waldorf. Watch my show. It's great. And also watch Lady Rhiannon. Check out these guys' blogs. And thanks again for hanging out with us.